Velora Prime was a glowing world resting on the edge of the Orion Belt, filled with green valleys and glowing crystal peaks that sang when the wind passed over them. It had been untouched for thousands of years, hidden behind layers of dead satellites and cloaking clouds, but now it stood open to visitors from across the stars. The ruling council of Velora sent their high-ranking envoy Liari to inspect the land for expansion and energy harvesting. Liari was calm, focused, proud of her culture, and had never once doubted her instinct in matters of science or power. From the beginning, the humans had taken an interest in the planet, but not for conquest. Their ships hovered above the surface, scanning the terrain not with greed, but concern. The human commander named Evan approached Liari's vessel as it landed near the crystal fields and offered peaceful dialogue. He brought data scans, old galactic maps, and historical logs. His voice remained steady as he warned Liari about the strange artifact buried beneath the surface. He believed it was ancient technology built by a long-extinct civilization, not meant to be awakened. Liari listened, but her expression never changed. She tilted her head once, then smiled in a quiet, dismissive way. Her advisors stood beside her, showing no reaction to Evan's concern. One of them whispered that humans were always afraid of progress and feared what they could not understand. Liari turned back to Evan, thanked him for his words, and stated that Velora Prime was under her domain. The excavation would begin at sunrise, and nothing would stop it. Evan did not shout or argue. He simply nodded, stepped back, and handed her a sealed file. It contained final scans and a recorded message. Then he returned to his ship and left the area. The air was tense, not with hatred, but something heavier. Liari watched his ship disappear into the clouds and thought nothing of it. To her, humans were cautious observers, not explorers. They had found their place among the stars, but still lacked courage to take bold steps. By the next morning, the alien crew gathered heavy machines and drilling tools. The crystal field shimmered under the sunlight, as if warning them to turn away. Liari stood in front of the excavation site, with her hand raised, her voice clear, as she ordered the drill to activate. Dust clouds rose, energy meters jumped, and the ground beneath them began to open, slowly revealing dark steps that led down into the unknown. She stood at the edge, staring into the hole, feeling a mix of excitement and pride. This was discovery, this was destiny, this was the kind of moment that made legends. She remembered Evan's calm eyes, but brushed the thought aside. To her, he was only afraid, and that fear had no place here. As the team prepared to descend into the ancient ruins, the wind shifted and the sky above flickered with strange colors. The machines began to pick up signals that no one could read. Liari raised a hand again, calling for silence. The ground gave a soft hum, like a whisper carried from deep below. She smiled once more, ready to unlock the secrets of Velora Prime. She had made her choice, and the warning was now behind her. Inside the open chamber, the air felt heavy and dry. Liari stepped down the ancient stone stairs with her team close behind her. Walls on each side were covered in carvings, glowing symbols moving slowly as if alive. The colors shifted with every breath they took, painting the cold chamber in patterns they could not understand. Liari felt a chill crawl across her skin, but her pride stood taller than her fear. She walked with steady steps, her eyes fixed forward, her voice calm as she gave orders. Behind her, the scientists scanned the walls with strange devices and whispered to one another. Their screens showed numbers rising in ways they had never seen. Heat spikes, magnetic surges, silent pulses from the deeper levels, but no one said stop. They believed this place held knowledge far older than any library, far beyond what the humans could grasp. They thought they had found something pure, something untouched by time and safe to control. Above the ground, the wind grew louder. Evan watched from orbit, his ship circling slowly above the crystal fields. He held a quiet look on his face, no anger, only concern. His crew watched the readings on their panels and shook their heads. The energy was building fast and wrong. 1. of his engineers said that the planet core was shaking in uneven waves as if something was waking up, something that had been asleep for longer than any species could remember. Back underground, Liari reached the core chamber. It was a wide round space with a tall pillar rising from the center, touching the high ceiling. The pillar glowed with light that pulsed in slow rhythm like a sleeping heart. She walked toward it with slow, careful steps while her team spread out around the room, placing scanners and recording every signal. One of her scientists reached out and touched the pillar. A flash of energy moved through the floor and lit up the carvings on the walls in sharp, bright red. Everyone froze, but nothing followed. No explosion, no sound, only the slow return of that pulsing light. Liari stepped closer, raised her hand and placed her palm against the pillar. The room changed. The light turned white, then blue, then black. Gravity twisted for a second, then returned. Her vision blurred, then cleared again. A deep sound rolled through the chamber, not like a machine, but like a voice speaking from the stone itself. No words, only a message wrapped in feeling. Pain, warning, hunger, sorrow. The crew backed away, but Liari kept her hand on the pillar, her eyes wide, her mouth silent. Above the ground, cracks formed across the crystal fields. Birds flew in wild circles and animals ran for cover. The sky turned gray without clouds, and the air grew still like breath held for too long. Human sensors picked up a spike unlike anything they had recorded before. Evan stood up from his chair, gave quick orders, and told his team to prepare escape pods for the alien crew, even if they had refused help earlier. Back in the chamber, Liari pulled her hand away. Her fingers shook, but she refused to show fear. The pillar's light faded, then returned again, pulsing faster now. The machines began to buzz, the air began to vibrate. One of her team members screamed as their scanner melted in their hand. Another dropped to their knees, clutching their head. The floor beneath them began to crack. Liari shouted for retreat, but the door behind them had closed without a sound. The ancient stones began to shift around the chamber, and the walls moved like waves frozen in stone. A rumble rose from beneath them, deep and endless. Something old was no longer sleeping. Evan sent another message from orbit, urging them to evacuate. His voice was calm but firm, warning them again that the reading showed structural collapse and spatial instability. Liari heard the message, but her pride still clung to her mind. She shouted back that they were handling the situation and needed no rescue. The humans prepared anyway. Inside the chamber, the pillar rose, higher, breaking through the ceiling as if reaching for the sky. Energy surged through the air, and the carvings across the walls turned into lines of fire. Liari stood at the center, eyes wide, heart pounding, watching the past awaken around her. She did not understand what she had touched, but she knew now that the warning had not come from fear, it had come from truth. The sky above Velora Prime turned darker, though it was not night. The light from the twin suns could not break through the strange gray veil forming in the upper atmosphere. The air thickened, and the birds that once circled the crystal peaks vanished into the forests. Mountains began to tremble without warning, and the rivers changed direction as if pulled by an invisible hand. Inside the ancient chamber, Liari held the wall for balance. Her team struggled around her, some already injured, some unable to move. Machines sparked and screens flashed symbols they had never programmed. The pillar now reached beyond the ceiling, and its light burned so bright that even looking at it caused pain. One scientist whispered that it was no longer a machine, but something alive, something aware. That whisper did not reach Liari's ears. Her thoughts were drowned by a deep sound echoing through her mind, a sound without voice but filled with memory of sorrow and ruin. From orbit, Evan and his crew watched the planet shift. Energy waves spread across the land, breaking trees, turning oceans into clouds. One region fell into a sinkhole so deep that their sensors could not measure the bottom. Human crew members turned to their commander, waiting for orders. Evan remained calm, gave instructions to launch rescue ships to hover near the alien camp, ready for emergency extraction. Inside the ruins, Liari's team tried to retreat, but the walls closed around them, forming new shapes, new paths, unfamiliar and endless. The structure was changing, as if it disliked their presence. A young technician fell into a crack that opened without sound. No scream, no final word, only silence, and then nothing. Liari shouted for her crew to follow her back toward the stairs, but the staircase was gone, replaced by smooth stone. Where the door once stood, she raised her arm to call for help, but no signal escaped the ruin. Her communication device sparked and burned out. The air became thin, the lights dimmed, the floor shook again. One of her advisors dropped to their knees, saying the place was feeding off their fear. Another cried out that this was not technology but a prison. Liari stood frozen as her pride began to fall away piece by piece. Above the ruins, human ships arrived. Drones spread out, scanning the structure, trying to find a way to break through the walls. One pilot asked if it was worth saving them after they had refused help. Evan said that saving lives was not about pride. It was about doing what was right, even when others failed to see it. The ground around the ruins cracked open. Red light escaped from the cracks and climbed into the sky, forming shapes that moved like smoke, alive and endless. Plants withered under the glow, animals ran blind into the wild. The pulse from the pillar reached the human ship, shaking their controls even from the sky. Inside the ruins, Liari fell to her knees. She no longer gave orders. Her voice was lost, her vision blurred, her thoughts tangled. Around her, the faces of her crew showed the same truth: fear, regret, helplessness. One whispered the human was right. Another said they should have listened. Liari clenched her fist, closed her eyes, and whispered a name she had once ignored. Evan's face returned to her memory, calm, patient, not angry, not proud, only concerned. She understood now what his warning had meant. He had seen something in the data, something she had refused to see. He had spoken not with pride, but with responsibility. A sudden noise filled the chamber, a voice made of many tones. Not loud, not soft, just present. It said nothing but carried a message they all felt inside. You opened what should have stayed closed. You awakened what even time had forgotten. Now the world must change. The humans launched a new wave of drones, with protective shields built to enter unstable zones. The drones reached the outer wall and began carving a way through. Each second counted, each pulse from the ruin made their mission harder. Still they pushed forward. Inside, Liari's eyes met those of her surviving team. She gave no speech, no order. Only a single word: escape. They moved as one, carrying the injured, holding onto each other, using every breath to reach the surface. The way out was blocked, but they hoped the humans were near. The collapse had begun. The planet was shifting. And for the first time in her life, Liari wished she had listened. The ground around the ancient ruin broke open as the sky above Velora Prime turned completely black. Lightning moved without sound across the clouds, shaping strange patterns that had never existed before. The wind carried no scent, no warmth, no direction. Forests far from the ruin began to collapse without touch. The planet was changing from its core, and the change was not natural. Human rescue ships hovered close to the edge of the ruin, while scanners searched for openings. Each pulse from the core shook the orbiting ships, but the human crew kept working. They sent mechanical units into the cracks and lowered ropes through deep holes in the ground. Evan stood near the edge of the command deck, his eyes locked on the growing storm around the ruin. He gave new orders without raising his voice, and his team moved fast, using machines that had been designed not for war, but for survival. Inside the ruin, Liari and her team moved through a narrow tunnel formed by the shifting stones. Every step felt like walking through a memory that did not belong to them. The walls flickered with images that changed when touched. One showed a city burning in silence, another showed stars falling like rain. Liari knew now that the ruin was more than ancient. It was a wound in time, a place sealed not by force, but by fear. Her legs trembled with every step, but she kept moving, holding the hand of a wounded crew member who could no longer walk alone. Her thoughts returned again and again to Evan's voice. The calm warning, the steady look in his eyes. She now understood that his words had not come from weakness but from experience. He had seen something she could not. The walls opened into a chamber where the floor had collapsed into darkness. Across the gap stood a human rescue drone, its lights blinking soft and blue. A thin bridge of stone stretched between them, unstable, but real. Liari took a deep breath and stepped forward, balancing her weight slowly. Behind her, the others waited, watching her every move. Above the chamber, human crew members lowered a rescue cage attached to a strong wire. One by one, they pulled survivors out of the ruin while the storm grew louder around them. The human pilot controlling the drone guided each movement with steady hands, ignoring the growing pressure waves from the artifact. He had trained for this moment, not for glory, not for praise, but for duty. Liari was the last to climb into the rescue cage. As she rose from the ruin, she looked down once more at the glowing pillar far below, now beating like a heart trying to wake something buried even deeper. She knew now that her choice had awakened more than danger. It had disturbed a force that the ancient builders had sealed for a reason. Her people had opened a door, and now they could not close it alone. As the rescue ship rose into the air, the pillar sent one final pulse across the land. The crystals in the valley shattered, and the energy wave chased the ship through the clouds. One human engineer jumped into a secondary ship and blocked the pulse with a device built from outdated tech. The device burned out instantly, but the ship survived. The engineer did not return. When the ship landed on the orbiting station, Liari stepped out and looked around. She saw humans working non-stop, moving supplies, treating wounds, comforting the injured without asking for thanks. They saved everyone they could, even those who had rejected them. Young human officer approached her with a quiet expression and handed her a folded message. It was a copy of Evan's original warning, the one she had ignored. At the bottom it had a new note written by Evan's hand saying, "You still have time to choose what comes next." Liari did not speak. Her throat was dry, her mind full. She looked around at the station walls, plain and strong. No gold, no crystal, no glory, but filled with purpose. The place smelled of metal and medicine, of tired people doing their best in a world that did not always care. She walked to the viewing deck and looked down at Velora Prime. The clouds now formed a spiral shape, spinning slowly above the place where the ruins still burned. She knew the world would never be the same. She knew her people would remember this moment, not as a victory, but as a lesson. And standing in silence, she also knew something else. The humans had not saved her because she deserved it. They saved her because it was right. And that truth now lived deeper in her heart than any power she had ever known. Velora Prime no longer looked like the world it had once been. The green valleys were gone, and the crystal peaks had melted into rivers of ash. The skies remained dim even when the twin suns rose. The ancient ruins still glowed beneath the surface, though no one dared return. A strange quiet covered the planet, as if nature itself was holding its breath. Survivors had been taken to orbiting stations and far colonies. What once was a symbol of beauty had become a warning. Liari sat alone in a quiet room within the human command vessel. She stared through the wide glass at the spinning planet below. Her reflection looked older now, even though only days had passed. Her robes were torn, her hands still carried faint marks from the pulse. She had spoken to no one since the rescue. Not because she had nothing to say, but because she did not know where to begin. Evan entered the room without sound and stood beside her. He said nothing at first, only followed her gaze. After a long pause, he handed her a small device. It played a single image of the human engineer who had sacrificed himself to block the final energy wave. His name was Arlen. He had only been part of the crew for 2 years. His smile in the photo was simple, honest, full of purpose. He had never met Liari, but had given his life to save hers. She held the device close and whispered a soft thank you, though she knew he would never hear it. Evan nodded once and left the room without waiting for more. He understood that some feelings could not be spoken all at once. They needed time-space silence. The Galactic Council gathered soon after. Liari stood before them in a room filled with voices of many worlds. Some wanted answers, others wanted punishment. But Liari raised her voice without fear, without excuse. She admitted her mistake and told them everything. She did not hide the warning she had ignored. She did not hide the price her pride had demanded. She told them about Arlen, about Evan, and about the humans who acted with courage when others had failed. Her words did not seek forgiveness. They offered truth. After the meeting, Liari returned to her people, now scattered across colonies and recovery stations. She no longer wore her title, no longer carried the symbols of leadership. Instead, she chose to work among the engineers, rebuilding shelters, treating wounds, clearing debris. Her hands, once used to give orders, now helped carry tools and lift broken machines. She spoke little but listened often. Months passed. A large memorial was built on a quiet moon orbiting Velora Prime. It stood beneath a wide glass sky where the stars always shone bright. Names of all who were lost in the collapse were written. They're both alien and human. At the center stood a statue of Arlen holding a rescue beacon in one hand and a datapad in the other. His expression was calm, like someone who had made peace with his choice. Liari visited the memorial alone. She walked past each name, tracing them with her fingers. When she reached the statue, she knelt and removed a silver pin from her robes. It was the final symbol of her old rank. She placed it at the base of the statue, then lowered her head. No words came. Only breath and memory. Later, she watched a group of human children teaching alien children how to build emergency tents. They laughed, made mistakes, then tried again. The sun reflected on their faces as if the past had never happened. One girl stood on a box and gave instructions in simple words. The others followed with eager hands. Among them were children from Liari's homeworld, wearing borrowed boots and patched coats. They smiled like any others. Liari stood beside one of the human teachers. He was older, tired, but kind. He looked at her with no judgment and said, "This is how healing begins." She nodded once and whispered yes. Far away, the ruins still glowed, but no longer pulsed. It had returned to sleep, or perhaps it only waited. But Liari knew that if it ever woke again, the humans would be ready, and this time so would she. The end.